Boy, was there a more dramatic result in Week 1 than the Minnesota Vikings home win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. I was kind of chuckling about that game as the week progressed. I believe on BETDAQ before that game, those teams were the two teams with the longest odds for the Super Bowl at that particular time. That might have changed. I think Cleveland can now be had maybe at longer odds than either one of those teams. But what you had in last week at Jacksonville and Minnesota were two teams who were projected to be among the worst teams in the league. But you know, sitting here in the BETDAQ NFL War Room, had 6 games on. That was not one of the 6 until it got down to about 5 minutes left in that game. Close ball game, and boy, am I glad I watched the last 5 minutes. Incredible ending to that game. Jacksonville had the worst offense in the league last year, driving the length of the field with a minute and a half left. Blaine Gabbert throwing an improbable long touchdown pass to Cecil Shorts with about 20 seconds left on the clock. I mean, the game looked over. Jaguars players and coaches, were jumping around excited on the sideline. I thought it was over. We were here live streaming as we are every Sunday, and I was going on about how I couldn't believe the Jags offense had moved down the field in that amount of time with no timeouts, and Blaine Gabbert had done something that he hadn't shown the ability to do at all throughout his first year. And then Minnesota ends up, over the course of 2 or 3 plays, putting Blair Walsh, their kicker, in a position to kick a 55-yard field goal to tie the game, which he does. Vikings win it in overtime. Incredible ending to that game. High drama. The Minnesota Vikings now take all that momentum on the road to Indianapolis this week to play a Colts team that just got beat up by the Chicago Bears. Now, that was Andrew Luck's first start. Luck, of course, the number 1 overall pick in April's NFL draft. Some expect him to be the best quarterback prospect in 20 years to come into the league. He looked pretty good to me against Chicago last week. I know he threw a couple interceptions, to be expected when you're a rookie. Piled up some yardage there, though. You could definitely see the skill set he has. You could definitely see why he was selected number 1 overall. Minnesota Vikings currently installed as a 1-point road favorite in this game on BETDAQ. Total hadn't been released yet. I'm expecting that in a matter of hours. 44.5 the total in this game on Vegas. Expected to be somewhere in that neighborhood on BETDAQ. And if you're going to bet on that totals market, you might want to look at that under. These two teams have been playing a lot of under football lately, especially Indianapolis. The under is 5-0 in the Colts' last 5 home games and 8-2 in the Colts' last 10 games overall. Obviously, one of the 2 losses for the under came last week in that Chicago game. The Colts defense allowing over 40 points to that Bears offense. The Colts, like I said, Andrew Luck was able to do some things. They were able to score some points. But if I was an Indianapolis Colts fan, I'd be very concerned again about that defense. I'm sure Colts fans are tired of watching a bad defense. Seems like Indianapolis has had bad defenses for about 15 years. And when Chuck Pagano was brought in to coach a team from the Baltimore Ravens, his first order of business was fixing that defense. Now, we've said for the Indianapolis Colts, they don't have the personnel for an instantaneous turnaround. Nobody was expecting Pagano to turn that unit into a top 10 unit in his first season this year. However, some improvement would be nice, and none of that improvement was evident against the Chicago Bears this past Sunday. Minnesota Vikings also have problems of their own on defense. We mentioned that the Jaguars were able to take it down the field last week, minute and a half left on the clock, no timeouts. That is not a good sign for the Minnesota Vikings. The Jacksonville Jaguars last year had the worst offense in the league. And they had the worst passing offense in the league by such a wide margin that Maurice Jones-Drew, their running back, was actually the leading rusher in the league, yet their pass offense was so bad they still had the worst overall offense in the league. I mean, Jags are a team who had the leading rusher in the league, but still had the worst offense in the league. That'll just tell you something about that passing game last year in Jacksonville. Now, maybe they've made huge strides this offseason, or maybe that Vikings secondary is just as bad as it was last year. Minnesota could not stop the pass last year. Looked like more of the same. They allowed Blaine Gabbert to throw for 260 yards this past Sunday. So they might be up against it, against Andrew Luck here. I know it's his second game, Luck, but still, this is going to be a test for that Vikings secondary. Do expect some points to be scored in this game. Minnesota really had to be pleased with the return of Adrian Peterson. I wasn't expecting him to even play. Of course, he's still recovering from that devastating knee injury last year. Peterson had been saying all offseason he was going to be ready for week one, but like I said, I wasn't expecting to see it. Sure wasn't expecting to see him get the amount of carries he got. And tell you what, he ran hard. Saw some of that game again. Peterson was running hard, scored a couple of touchdowns, so he is back in the fold, probable this week, so he will go for the Minnesota Vikings. Percy Harvin, they've got to get it in this guy's hands more. I know they're trying. They try to get it in his hands plenty, but can't get it in this guy's hands enough. He's one of the most electrifying playmakers in the NFL. Can run it, can catch it. They use him almost strictly at wide receiver now, but I think they should try to find every way possible to get the ball in Percy Harvin's hands. In terms of the Colts on offense, as we saw last week, they're going to go as far as Andrew Luck takes them. And Luck showed some flashes last week. It looks like he might be able to take him. We don't want to say far. I don't expect the Colts to win more than 4 or 5 games, but they're not going to be as putrid on offense as they were last year, I'll tell you that. And so, again, we do expect to see some scoring from this game. Both these teams have been playing a lot of under football. We talked about those trends pointing towards the under. But aside from those trends, when you look at these bad defenses, and the Colts offense certainly looked improved last week, you'd expect Minnesota's offense to be improved with Christian Ponder in his second year now, Peterson back from injury. You know, I do lean towards the over here. I'm going to just buck those trends. I'm going to say I like over 44.5 here. And I lean towards the Colts, lean towards the home team +1. Don't really think there's a discernible difference between these two teams. I mean, who knows? It's week 2. All of these assumptions we make now could prove to be wrong. But right now, I think these are two bad teams. I don't think either one of these teams is going to make the playoffs. And the Colts showed me something last week. I know the score was ugly. They got beat by a wide margin. I was happy about that because I was on the Bears -9.5. Still, though, I saw some definite signs out of that offense, signs of life out of that offense. Looked maybe a little better than I expected to see in the first week of the season. Wouldn't be surprised if when they face that soft Vikings secondary this week, that Colts offense is able to have even a little more success. So I do lean towards Indianapolis +1 in this game. Don't think I feel strongly enough about it to actually get involved. That shouldn't stop you from getting involved, though, in what should be a closely contested game this weekend.